I have dedicated my entire existence to providing love, resources myself, until an evening at a dinner table laden with food I had purchased, I overheard words that irrevocably broke me. This account is not merely about shame, it is about an awakening. For anyone who has ever felt unseen within their own residence, this story will resonate. Remember to subscribe and let me know in the comments from where you are viewing. I am eager to hear your narrative as well. I can still recall the sound of crystal, the soft melody of jazz that filled the home I financed, and the fragrance of the roasted chicken I had prepared that morning, which cooked slowly while I completed tasks for a dinner I was not meant to attend. Yet, I was present because Olivia had neglected to inform me that her parents were visiting again, and the house had to be immaculate once more. I ought to have known better than to remain. I should have anticipated what would unfold the instant her mother regarded me with eyes that were a mixture of curiosity and condescension and inquired, "And you are?" Olivia responded without hesitation. "Oh," she declared, laughing as if it were the most amusing comment imaginable. "That's Margaret, our informal housekeeper. She keeps things in order." Everyone joined in the laughter, including my son. I simply stood there, clutching the empty wine bottle I had retrieved from the cellar. I offered a polite smile, as though the ground was not giving way beneath me, as if my heart were not disintegrating bit by bit. I made my excuses, placed the bottle on the worktop, and proceeded slowly to my bedroom. The laughter continued behind me. Not a single person, not even my own son, bothered to correct her, to state, "That's my mother," to say anything at all. That night sleep eluded me. I sat at the edge of my bed, gazing at the door I had painted myself when we initially moved in. I recalled the day I signed the mortgage documents. My name, my credit score, my deposit. Ethan had just finished university. Olivia had not yet entered our lives. They had nothing. I provided them with everything. And at that moment I was the housekeeper. The following morning I prepared coffee as usual. I fed the cat that Olivia feigned to adore. And when she descended the stairs in her yoga attire, too preoccupied with her phone to offer a good morning, I stood and waited. She eventually glanced up. I presented her with the keys, all of them. The front door, the back, the garage, the letterbox. "What is this?" she inquired, her manicured brow creased in confusion. I smiled. "Good luck with the mortgage payments now." She blinked. "What?" I moved past her along the corridor, past the photographs I had framed, the furniture I had selected, the walls I had painted. I took nothing with me, only my handbag and the coat I had worn when I brought Ethan home from the hospital. I did not even bid farewell. I heard Ethan call my name as I opened the door. I did not pause. He pursued me barefoot on the drive, but I continued walking. I did not slam the car door. I shut it softly, calmly, because something within me had broken, but not in the manner you might imagine. It was not anger. It was not sorrow. It was clarity. And that was the most unsettling aspect of it all, because clarity is quiet. It does not shout. It does not plead. It simply understands. And I understood for the first time in my life that I was finished. I was unsure of my destination, but I was certain of where I would not remain. The final image in my rearview mirror was of Ethan standing on the drive, looking bewildered. He had no inkling of the magnitude of his loss, and at that point neither did I. It is said that one does not comprehend they were drowning until they finally take a breath. That initial evening in the small flat bequeathed to me by my great-aunt Ruth did not feel like freedom, not immediately. It was silence, a dense, reverberating silence that blanketed everything like a layer of dust. The flat had the scent of time. Aged floorboards, discolored wallpaper, a heater that groaned as if it had experienced better eras. I placed my bag on the kitchen table and stood there, uncertain whether to weep or to laugh. I did neither. I simply stared at the chipped tiles, recalling the home from which I had just departed. But it was no longer a home, not for me. In the subsequent days, I moved like a specter. I slept on the sofa because the bedstead in the bedroom was damaged. I consumed peanut butter sandwiches and microwaved soup. I contacted no one, not because I lacked connections, but because no one had contacted me. Ethan did not text, did not email, not a single communication. I surmise Olivia had instructed him not to. Or perhaps even worse, he simply did not care. I found myself repeatedly thinking about that dinner, about their laughter, about his laughter. I raised that boy on my own after my ex-husband departed. I relinquished my career, my aspirations, myself. I cleaned motel rooms by night and stocked shelves at dawn just to maintain a roof over our heads. And when my parents passed away and left me their insurance money, I used it all to purchase a house, a home. I never requested rent, never made him contribute a single penny. And yet, in Olivia's perception of the world, I had become the domestic help. I began writing at night in old spiral notebooks, the type I used to purchase for Ethan in secondary school. I filled page after page, not for anyone else to read, but for myself. I wrote things I had never articulated. About how I would stand in the kitchen, hoping he would say thank you. About how I would cry in the garage when they would go out for dinner without inviting me. About how I feigned sleep to avoid hearing them ridicule my television shows in the living room I financed. Then one day, while searching for a light bulb in the upstairs storage cupboard, I discovered the old metal trunk Ruth used to keep under her sewing machine. It was heavy and rusted. I forced it open, anticipating to find thread and buttons. Instead, I found envelopes, dozens of them, and one in particular that altered everything. It was addressed to me in Ruth's familiar script, dated nearly 3 decades prior. If you are reading this, it means you have returned, and I am sorry that was necessary. My heart throbbed as I unfolded the pages. They were discolored and delicate. Inside were copies of hospital forms, notes, and a single photograph of a newborn swaddled in a hospital blanket. Not Ethan. There was a name, Michael Jameson. I read the letter 3 times before it registered. Ruth had been a nurse at the hospital where Ethan was born. She mentioned always having suspicions. She had observed something unusual in the nursery on the night of my delivery, a last-minute room change, a mix-up with the identification tags. But by the time she reported the issue, it was too late. The infants had already been discharged. She never informed me, stating she was afraid and hoped she was mistaken. However, years later, she discovered a document concealed in her files, a confidential settlement from the hospital to another family. And at that moment, she knew Ethan was not my son. My hands quaked. I thought I might faint. I stared at the photograph, at the name Michael Jameson. My mind struggled to accept it, because if this were true, who was Ethan? Who was I to him? And then something peculiar occurred. I did not experience grief or rage. I felt a sense of liberation. Not because I did not love Ethan, but because suddenly all those years of suffering, of feeling like an outsider in my own life, became comprehensible. Perhaps that coldness I had always perceived from him was not a figment of my imagination. Perhaps he had always felt like an outsider too. And perhaps I was not delusional after all. I dedicated the remainder of the night to reading every document in that trunk. Ruth had preserved everything. DNA reports, an affidavit, a small article about the Jameson family, successful, educated, local, and still residing in the same town. My biological son had been here all along, growing up just a few miles away. I carefully folded the letters, placed them in a new envelope, and put them in my bedside table drawer. Then I observed myself in the mirror for a very long time. I did not recognize the woman who looked back at me. But for the first time in a long while, I was not ashamed of her. She was damaged indeed, but she was reawakening. And the world had no idea what that portended yet. There is a type of silence that is not tranquil. It is punitive. That was the kind of silence I inhabited for weeks after reading Aunt Ruth's letter. I was uncertain how to proceed with the information. I carried it within me like a live electrical wire, perilous to handle, yet impossible to disregard. I did not contact Ethan. I did not search for Michael. I simply was. Each day I awoke, prepared a single cup of coffee, gazed out the dusty kitchen window, and attempted to comprehend my new identity. The Margaret who raised Ethan was not the same woman who read those letters. That Margaret was a mother, once a wife, a caregiver, a provider of everything. But who was I without that role? One evening the heater in the flat failed. I lit a candle and wrapped myself in blankets, curling up on the sofa with the hospital files on my lap. I must have read them 100 times. Every line, every signature, every timestamp, it all aligned. It was genuine. My biological son, Michael Jameson, was born on the same night as Ethan, in the same wing of a hospital that would later quietly settle with another family, hoping the truth would remain concealed. Ruth had duplicated everything before she passed away. She left me the fragments of a truth that had been stolen from me. I felt grief, but not for Ethan. I grieved for the time, the moments I could have shared with Michael. The birthday celebrations, the first days of school, the scraped knees and science projects. All those activities I thought I was doing for my child were intended for someone else. And yet, somehow, I felt no animosity towards Ethan. My love for him had not been biological. It had been unconditional. Or so I believed. But when someone you raise fails to defend you, fails even to acknowledge you, it compels you to reconsider everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally composed myself. I had been in hiding for too long. I was not prepared to face Ethan, not yet. But I could begin somewhere quiet. I walked into town and stood across the street from the small bookshop near Main and Elm. Jameson's Books. It was painted a deep green with hand-lettered signs in the windows. I had passed it dozens of times before without noticing. He was there, Michael. I did not need to ask. He appeared to be about 30, perhaps slightly older, with a neat appearance and reading glasses. He was assisting a young woman in finding a poetry book. His voice was gentle and patient. His posture was unassuming yet self-assured. I stood across the street, my heart pounding, my eyes fixed on the son I never knew I had, and I wept right there on the pavement. Not sobbing, not loudly, just silent, relentless tears that streamed down my cheeks and into the collar of my coat. I did not enter, not that day. I simply observed. And then I repeated the act the following day, and the next. It evolved into a ritual. I would walk the block, sit on the bench near the corner, feign to check my phone or drink coffee from a paper cup, and I would watch Michael live the life from which I had been excluded. It was not stalking. It was mourning, but also preparation. Because gradually I was beginning to piece things together. While I sat outside that bookshop, I started to notice details. The schedule of deliveries, the names of customers, the rhythm of the store. I was observing, yes, but not just him. I began to track them too, Ethan and Olivia, discreetly. I knew their routines by heart. Olivia consistently posted on social media, tagging her preferred brunch locations, yoga studios, and wine tastings. It was not difficult to follow her movements. And what I discovered was sickening. They were not struggling, they were feigning. Olivia's business, some lifestyle coaching enterprise, was largely an illusion. Rented office space, paid followers, credit cards extended to their limits to uphold an image. And Ethan, he had resigned from his job 6 months prior. Olivia termed it manifesting a new chapter. I termed it self-deception. They were constructing a house of cards, oblivious to the impending storm. I did not disclose my discoveries to anyone, not yet. Instead, I began a second journal. Unlike the first, which was filled with emotions and sorrow, this one was methodical. Dates, names, business registrations, public records. I was no longer just grieving, I was strategizing. They believed I was gone, invisible, inconsequential. But I was more present than I had ever been. And I was about to remind them precisely who I was. The first time I saw Michael up close, I was speechless. It was a rainy Thursday. The bookshop was nearly deserted, and he was restocking the biography section, humming to himself. I had lingered outside for too long. And when he turned and looked through the front window, our eyes met. He offered a polite, welcoming smile, nothing more. Just the kind of kindness one extends to a stranger. And that is what I was to him, a stranger. My heart tightened. I turned away abruptly, pretending to check my phone, but my hands were shaking too violently to be convincing. I walked quickly, turning the corner, barely reaching my car before the tears began. How does one inform someone that their entire existence began with an error? How do you look a grown man in the eye and say, "You are not who you believe you are, and neither am I"? I returned home and retrieved Ruth's letter again, reading it 3 more times. She had not merely stumbled upon the truth. She had investigated it. The name Michael Jameson was not a guess. It was confirmed. She had found the settlement documents. The hospital never informed me because I was never supposed to know. And the Jamesons, they must have had some knowledge, perhaps not the complete truth, but enough to accept a discreet payment. But I was not here for retribution against them. I was not even certain of my purpose. I simply wanted to know him, to see if the ache in my chest could be assuaged by the reality of who he was. So I returned. I began with small steps. I purchased a book. Michael processed the sale himself. "A good choice," he said with a smile. "These are difficult to find these days." His voice was warm, familiar in a way that made my throat constrict. He handed me the bag, his fingers briefly brushing mine. I nodded. "Do you own this place?" "In a way," he replied. "My parents helped me get started. They are retired now, so I keep myself occupied here." Of course they had helped. Of course he had support. Unlike Ethan, who had had nothing but my blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and who had, in turn, offered me up as a jest. Michael had parents but not me. And Ethan had me, but never valued what I provided. The universe had muddled the puzzle and left us all bleeding over the incorrect pieces. I started visiting the bookshop every few days casually. Sometimes I would buy a novel, other times I would just browse. Michael began to recognize me. He would say, "Back again," with that effortless smile. We engaged in small talk. The weather, books, local events. I never revealed my name, not yet. It was not the right time. Meanwhile, in the shadows of my former life, things were changing. Ethan sent me a single message, a text that read, "Mom, are you okay?" Nothing more. After 3 weeks of silence, that was all I received. I did not reply. I had nothing further to say. But I began to investigate their world more thoroughly. I accessed the deed to the house. It was still in my name. Olivia had attempted to refinance without my consent and was denied. She could not afford the mortgage. Ethan had no income. I could have evicted them immediately, but that would have been too simple. No, I needed them to experience the gradual unraveling, the fear, the realization that the foundation upon which they stood was not just precarious. It belonged entirely to someone else, me. Every night I wrote. My new journal was meticulous. Every receipt, every conversation, every time Michael mentioned a hobby, a favorite author, a childhood memory, I recorded it. Not to use against him, but to understand the son I never had the opportunity to raise. And between the lines, I began to perceive the truth more clearly than ever before. Ethan did not treat me poorly because he was switched at birth. He treated me poorly because he chose to. Because Olivia permitted him to. Because somewhere along the way, he ceased to view me as someone to respect and started to view me as someone to disregard. But Michael, he did not know me at all. And yet, he treated me with more kindness in 5 minutes than Ethan had in 5 years. I was not ready to tell him, not yet. But I was close. And when the time came, I would not just tell him who I was. I would tell him everything about the hospital, about the switch, about the life that was stolen from us both. But first, I had to witness the collapse of the life I had already abandoned. Because once the final piece fell, I would not be looking back. I never intended to become a shadow in my own narrative. But sometimes the only way to perceive people clearly is to withdraw from the spotlight. After that day in the bookshop, something within me shifted. Not abruptly, but like a slow dawn spreading across a frozen landscape. Quiet, inevitable. I did not hurry anything. I was not merely attempting to reconnect with a son I never knew. I was attempting to reclaim myself. I began to walk with a straighter posture, to speak with a stronger voice. I purchased a second-hand laptop and began transcribing my notes into files. Evidence, timelines, names. This was no longer a diary. It was a strategy, a means of survival. And one thing became abundantly clear. Ethan and Olivia's world was held together by makeshift repairs and falsehoods. The house they occupied, my house, was still registered in my name. Olivia's lifestyle business, Olivia Ascends, was a fabricated enterprise. Fake clients, counterfeit testimonials. She had constructed a brand based on buzzwords and filters, dispensing personal growth advice while driving a leased luxury vehicle she could not afford. I located the LLC registration documents online. I reviewed tax records. I looked up business reviews. Every post she made was meticulously curated. Every event they attended was a photo opportunity. And behind it all was debt, a significant amount of debt. Maxed out credit cards, a defaulted private loan, Ethan's student debt still outstanding. They were suffocating under a mountain of bills, yet were too proud, or perhaps too arrogant, to admit it. That is when I knew that if I pulled a single thread, everything would unravel. But I did not yet, because I had one more step to take first. Michael. I continued to visit the bookshop, and he still did not know who I was. But each interaction eroded my fear. We discussed books, life, and trivial matters. Television shows, good coffee, city noise. Once we sat at the small cafe next door, and he told me how he had nearly become a teacher, but his passion for books led him into business. "You remind me of someone," he remarked once, sipping his tea. "Someone I cannot quite place." I smiled. "Perhaps a librarian." He laughed. "Perhaps." That moment lingered with me for days. I did not just like him, I recognized him. Not merely from the file I had read or the photograph Ruth had left me, but in his treatment of people, in the way he listened, the quiet strength he possessed. Felt akin to my own. It was evident in his posture, his composure, his presence. I began to imagine a different life, one in which I had raised him, one in which we baked biscuits in the kitchen, where I took him to football matches and cheered from the sidelines. I could picture it so vividly that it caused my chest to ache. But I could not go back. So I planned for what was to come. The first thing I did was contact a solicitor, not for revenge but for justice. I wanted the house sold. I had every legal right to it. I had made the deposit, paid every bill, and never transferred the ownership. Ethan had always said, "We will put it in your name later. No rush." Of course, there was no rush for him. I was paying for everything. Now I wanted my name back, my rights, my home, if not physically, then legally. I met with a solicitor in the city center, a woman of about my age, sharp and direct. She listened without judgment. When I explained what had happened, she nodded slowly and said, "We will file the motion this week." I signed the documents with a steady hand. That evening I walked past the house. The porch light was on. Olivia was sitting on the swing, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in hand. Inside, Ethan was on the sofa playing video games. Their lives were on autopilot, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath them was already shifting. It was not about punishing them. It was about restoring equilibrium. And when the house sold, they would experience what I had felt for years. Powerlessness. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would understand what it meant to be cast aside. I did not slam doors. I did not scream. I just observed, waited, and walked away. The first domino had fallen, and none of them even knew it yet. I have always believed that silence is more potent than noise, that true strength lies not in the volume of one's fight, but in the depth of one's conviction. The day the official notice was sent to Ethan and Olivia, I was sitting at a cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea with a calmness I had not experienced in years. My solicitor had said they would receive it by 10 a.m. sharp. At 10:05 my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then I turned it over and let the silence be my response. It was not that I did not want to hear his voice. I was just not prepared to hear him lie. Later that afternoon, I checked my email and saw his message. It was not lengthy. Just, "Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Olivia is freaking out." Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now they could not refinance because the person they had deemed too weak to be of consequence was the one holding the deed, and they had never anticipated it. A week later I received another call. Olivia this time. I did not answer her either. She left a voicemail, her tone strained, barely composed. "Margaret, we really need to talk. This is all just, it is a misunderstanding. Ethan says you are going through something, and we are here to support you. But you are putting our lives at risk, and that is not fair." I listened twice. She referred to the house as hers, and my silence became sharper, more intentional. They did not understand yet, but they would. 2 days later, Ethan appeared at my flat. I saw him through the peephole before he even knocked. Hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, a man in distress. I did not open the door. He stood there for a long time. He knocked once, then again, then said, "Mom, please do not do this." I stood on the other side, my hand on the doorknob, but I did not turn it. I let him experience the discomfort of being ignored, just as I had for years. The following week, my solicitor finalized the paperwork to list the house. I would receive the full profit. Every penny, legally, ethically, emotionally, was mine. Olivia attempted to contest it, claiming a contribution of value. My solicitor smiled and said, "Let us see her prove that in court." She could not, because she had never invested in anything but appearances, and now those were crumbling, one filter at a time. Word spread. Olivia's parents ceased commenting on her social media posts. Clients began to withdraw. She made a video attempting to explain the injustice of generational property law. People saw through it. And I did not post a thing. I just kept visiting Michael's bookshop. We had coffee again, discussed an old novel we both admired. He recommended a memoir to me. "It is about grief," he said, "but also forgiveness." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think you would like it," he added. Perhaps I would, but not yet. I was not finished grieving or forgiving. At home, I began boxing up old photographs. Pictures of Ethan as a baby, school portraits, birthday parties where I did all the work and received none of the credit. I did not discard them, but I put them away because the woman who had spent her life giving everything was gone. And the woman who had taken her place, she was not angry, she was awake. The papers were signed. The house was going on the market. And somewhere inside that green bookshop across town, my real son laughed at something a customer said, completely unaware that his life was about to change too, but in the best possible way. Because not all losses are tragedies. Some of them are beginnings in disguise. I always thought masks were something people wore to costume parties, but Olivia wore hers like a second skin. Flawless, smiling, unshakable. The kind of woman who always knew how to pose for a photograph, how to modulate her voice just right in public. But the thing about masks is that eventually they crack, and I was about to shatter hers completely. The idea occurred to me one morning while browsed the local business directory. I had already gathered enough personal information. Credit problems, fraudulent Instagram partnerships, late mortgage payments. But I wanted more than rumors. I wanted facts, something concrete, something they could not spin. So I hired a local business consultant, a man named Darren. Quiet, professional, discreet. I told him I needed a full audit of a business. Nothing illegal, just a private, in-depth investigation into its structure. I gave him Olivia's company name, Olivia Ascends LLC. He began his work. A week later, he delivered everything in a neat folder. And what he found, even I was not prepared for. Olivia's entire business model was a fabrication. No tax filings for the last 2 quarters, several invoices forged to appear as if they came from real clients. But the clients did not exist. Photo shoots were staged at rented properties she claimed were home makeovers. Her so-called partnerships were just affiliate links with inflated metrics. She was not just pretending to be successful. She was deceiving everyone. I asked Darren, would this withstand scrutiny? He looked at me and said, if this becomes public, she is finished financially and professionally. And that is when I made a decision. I printed everything. Then I found the address of Olivia's parents, the same people who once laughed in my home, clinking wine glasses while their daughter humiliated me in my own kitchen. I mailed them the file anonymously. No letter, no signature, just a simple note on top that read, everything you think you know is a performance. 2 days later, the first cracks appeared. Olivia's Instagram went silent. No stories, no curated morning routines. Her newest post, an inspirational quote about being misunderstood, was flooded with strange comments. Then, like dominoes, her world began to collapse. Her website went offline for maintenance. Her last planned workshop was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. And then I heard the cherry on top from an old neighbor who still followed her. Olivia's mother was seen leaving her house in a rage, shouting on the phone, her face red, her handbag swinging wildly. Whatever transpired behind those closed doors, it was not filtered, and it was not pleasant. Ethan called me again that night. I did not answer. He left another voicemail. Mom, I do not know what is happening. Olivia's parents are not speaking to us. Someone sent them things, documents. They think we forged them. Did you? Did you do this? I did not reply. He was finally seeing her for who she really was, and himself too. He had spent years defending a woman who destroyed everything in her path, starting with me. Let him feel it. Let him sit in it. That night I walked to the bookshop again. Michael was closing up. He waved when he saw me. Back again, he said, unlocking the door to let me in. You should just work here at this point. I smiled. Perhaps I should. We sat on the floor, surrounded by stacked paperbacks. He was cataloging a new shipment. I helped without being asked. Why do you come here? He asked, not unkindly. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. Really? He had my eyes. I had not noticed before. I like the way it feels in here, I said. Like nothing is pretending to be something it is not. He tilted his head, considering me. Me too. We worked in silence after that, no small talk, no more questions. But in that quiet, something settled between us. Not the truth, not yet, but something close, a thread connecting us. And for the first time, I did not feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt seen. And the woman who once stood invisible in her own kitchen, she was gone. In her place stood someone they never expected, someone they never should have underestimated. I used to think heartbreak arrived in one significant blow, like a car crash or a door slamming shut. But it is not like that, not always. Sometimes it arrives slowly, like water seeping through a roof, drip by drip, until one day the entire ceiling collapses. And Ethan, he was finally standing under the deluge. The news had reached him by then. The house was officially listed for sale. The mask Olivia wore had crumbled, her business exposed, her reputation unraveling, and with nowhere else to direct the blame, Ethan did what he always did. He came running to me. I heard the knock before I saw him. It was a quiet afternoon. I was just finishing a cup of tea when the sound echoed through the flat. 3 soft raps, hesitant, like the knock of someone unsure if they would be welcomed or turned away. I opened the door slowly. He looked as if he had not slept in days. Unshaven, thinner than I remembered. His shirt wrinkled as if pulled from the floor. "Mom," he said, his voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I did not answer, just stepped aside. He walked in and stood in the middle of the room as if uncertain what to do with his body. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "To us." I almost laughed. Us. As if there had been an us in years. I sat down in the armchair opposite him, calm, composed. "I am not doing anything to you, Ethan. I am doing something for me." His jaw clenched. "You are selling the house. My house. I grew up there. And you gave it away," I said, my voice low. "You let your wife turn me into your maid. You watched it happen. You laughed. You never even apologized." He did not deny it, just looked at the floor. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he mumbled. "I did not know it hurt you like that." I stared at him. "That is the problem, Ethan. You never bothered to know what hurt me. You just assumed I would always be there, cleaning up after you, paying your bills, nodding along while you let that woman chip away at who I was." He flinched. "Olivia is not who I thought she was. That is not news to me." He finally looked up at me, his eyes glassy now. "I lost everything." I did not blink. "No, you gave it away." Silence stretched between us. "I miss you," he whispered. I sat up straighter. "I raised you," I said. "Fed you, clothed you, sacrificed for you. And you let me be humiliated in the house I bought." His lip trembled. "I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something." "You built a lie," I said. "And now it is falling apart." He stood then, pacing the room. "So that is it. You just walk away." I got up, walked over to the drawer by the kitchen, and pulled out the envelope Ruth had left me. I held it in my hands. "I am going to tell you something now," I said. "And I need you to listen. Really listen." He nodded, confused. I handed him the envelope. "These are your birth records. Read them." He sat, opened it slowly. His brow furrowed, then fell. He read the letter, the hospital files, the DNA test Ruth had quietly ordered after all those years. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. This cannot be real." "It is. You are saying I am not your son? I am saying you were not born to me, but I raised you as if you were. I gave you every piece of me, even when you did not want it." He went pale. "So who is your real son?" I did not answer. He sat there, shell-shocked, his mouth open, the pages trembling in his hands. "I do not know who I am anymore," he whispered. "Now you know how I felt," I said. "For years." He did not cry, not really. But something in him broke. And I saw it happen. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just peace. Because I finally said what needed to be said. I walked him to the door. He turned, his eyes pleading. "Can we fix this?" I met his gaze. "I do not know," I said. "But it is not my job to try anymore." And I closed the door gently behind him, not with spite, but with finality. Because for the first time in my life, I was not the one holding it open. It took me 3 days to decide how I was going to do it. I rehearsed the conversation in front of the mirror, in my car, even in the queue at the grocery store with my hand clutched around a basket of oranges, whispering lines I could barely finish. "I am your mother. There was a mistake. You have lived a life that was not meant for you. And so have I." But nothing sounded right. Because how do you introduce a truth like that into someone's life and expect them to survive the impact? Still, I had to try. Michael was in the bookshop as usual. The light inside streamed through the windows in golden beams, softening the shelves and scattering shadows across the hardwood floor. It felt like a sacred space, a place where truth belonged. When he looked up and smiled, I almost turned around and walked away, but I did not. "Hey," he said. "You came at the right time. We just received a new batch of rare poetry editions." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Actually," I said, I came to talk." He studied me for a second, sensing something in my voice. Sure, come on back. He led me through a side door to a tiny break room. A kettle on the counter, a mismatched sofa, a chip table. Real life, no filters. We sat. I have been coming here for a reason. I started, twisting my hands together. I figured, he said softly. You have. You are not exactly here for the books. I gave a small sad laugh. No, I am not. Then I took out the envelope, Ruth's letter, the birth records, the DNA proof, and set it on the table between us. What is this? He asked, cautious. Something that is going to change everything. He looked at me, waiting. Some 30 years ago, I said, my voice breaking. There was a mistake at the hospital. 2 babies were switched at birth. His eyebrows drew in, confusion blooming across his face. My son, I said, was given to another family. He went very still. And theirs was given to me. He did not say anything for a long moment. I raised him, I continued, loved him with everything I had, but he did not love me back. Not really. His eyes searched mine, slowly connecting pieces I was not saying aloud. You think I am. I know you are. He looked down at the envelope, picked it up with trembling hands. Inside were the documents, the timeline, the explanation, Ruth's letter with her quiet confession. He read in silence. Every second stretched into an eternity. When he finished, he did not look at me right away. He just set the papers down, his fingers still resting on the edges as if he needed to hold on to something. This is a lot, he finally said. I know. And you are Margaret? Yes. He looked up, his eyes glassy. I do not feel anything. Not yet. You do not have to, I said. I am not here to ask for a place in your life. I wanted you to know. I needed you to know. He nodded slowly. Why now? Because I could not live with the silence anymore. Because the truth deserved to breathe. He leaned back, exhaling hard. I have parents. They raised me well. I know. I love them. I would never ask you not to. We sat in that tiny room, surrounded by books and the scent of old paper and peppermint tea. And I felt something I had not felt in years, relief. Not joy, not closure, but the freedom of no longer carrying something so heavy alone. He stood after a while, pacing slowly. I do not know what to do with this, he said honestly. I do not either. But I do not hate you. Tears filled my eyes. That is more than I expected. He turned to face me again. You did not have to come, but you did. I did not know how not to, I said. He nodded again, a quiet understanding settling between us. Can we take it slow? He asked. I do not want to make this something it is not. I would not ask for anything else. He gave me a faint, fragile smile. Do you want to stay for tea? I smiled back. I would love to. We did not talk about the files again that afternoon. We talked about books and the weather, and how he hated the sound of wind chimes but loved the rain. And though the past still sat between us, unopened and raw, we had started something. Not a relationship, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. By the time autumn arrived, the leaves were not the only things changing. The house sold more quickly than anticipated. I received the full asking price, more than I had imagined. Ethan and Olivia had to vacate within 30 days. No extensions, no renegotiations. I did not evict them out of anger. I evicted them out of necessity because that house had been my prison for too long. And watching them pack up their curated life, box by box, knowing every pillow, plant, and designer trinket had been purchased on borrowed time. It felt like watching a theater set being dismantled. The play was over, the illusion gone. The day the moving lorry came, I drove past. I did not stop. I just observed from a distance as Olivia barked orders at the movers, her sunglasses concealing whatever remained of her pride. Ethan stood on the lawn, his phone pressed to his ear, pacing in circles. I wonder if he ever thought he would see this day. I wonder if he knew I would be the one to bring it. Their fall was not dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no scandals in the local news, but it was complete. Olivia's parents withdrew their financial support. Her business lost every major sponsorship. Her brand, once pristine, was now whispered about in corners of the town. The woman who had laughed at me in my own kitchen now could not afford her overpriced skincare line or daily matcha. Ethan tried to find a job, any job. But with no degree, no references, and no recent experience, doors did not open. He moved into a small flat on the outskirts of the town. I heard this from the solicitor. I did not ask, but I also did not celebrate, because this was not about revenge. It was about truth, about consequences. Meanwhile, my life, quietly and steadily, was becoming something new. Michael and I continued to meet, always casually. Coffee, book discussions, shared articles, and little comments about life. He asked about my writing once, and I told him I had started working on a memoir, that I had a story to tell, even if I never published it. He said, "You should. Stories like that matter." He still did not call me Mom, and I did not expect him to. That was not the point. We were building something not out of obligation but out of choice, and that made all the difference. One afternoon we walked through the farmer's market together. He picked up a jar of apple butter and laughed. "My mom used to make this every autumn." Something about the way he said, "My mom," did not sting. Felt okay, natural, right? Because he had a mom, and I had a son who did not see me until it was too late. Some nights I sat alone with my tea, wondering if Ethan was sleeping on a mattress or the floor, if Olivia still wore her silk robes, if they looked at each other now and saw all the things they had ignored before. I did not miss them. I missed the idea of what we were supposed to be. But grief like that, it is a shadow. Fades little by little. And pride grows, especially when you learn to love yourself more than you loved their approval. I walked through my old neighborhood one last time before the sale closed. Not to haunt it, but just to say goodbye. I passed the school Ethan used to attend, the park where I pushed him on swings, the grocery store where I would count coupons to afford his favorite cereal. And I let it all go because I had given everything I had to a family that never gave back. And now I was giving to someone who might never call me Mom, but still looked at me with kindness, with curiosity, with respect. Sometimes you do not need redemption. You just need peace. And I was finally beginning to feel it. It was early November when I received the text from Ethan. Just one line. "Can we meet?" Just once. I stared at it for a long time. It had been weeks since I had last seen him, weeks of silence, of distance that felt heavier than any argument we could have had. But something about the tone, it was not angry or desperate or accusing, sounded like surrender. We met at a small park on the edge of the town, the kind with rusted benches and a path that looped around a dried-up pond. I chose the spot because it was neutral. No memories, no ghosts. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench with his hands clasped between his knees. He looked up, and for a moment he reminded me of the boy he used to be. Awkward, unsure, awaiting direction. I sat down beside him, careful not to sit too close. He cleared his throat. "I am not here to ask for anything," he said. I nodded, saying nothing. I wanted to understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope again. The one with Ruth's letter, the documents, the DNA results. I handed it to him without a word. He did not open it, just held it on his lap as if he had already read it 1,000 times. "I did a test of my own," he said. "After you told me. Same result." I nodded again. "I spent weeks trying to figure out what to do with it," he continued. "And I kept thinking, if I was not your son, then what was I?" I looked at him, then really looked, and I said softly, "You were my child. But I treated you like. I know how you treated me." He winced. "I am not asking for forgiveness," he said quickly. "I do not deserve it." "You do not," I said plainly. "But that does not mean I hate you." He turned towards me, his eyes wet. "Then what does it mean?" It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." The silence that followed was thick with meaning. He bowed his head. I thought I was protecting Olivia, standing by her. But I was just hiding behind her, was I not? "You let her rewrite the story, and you handed her the pen." He nodded slowly. "I wish I could undo it." "You cannot." We sat like that for a while, two people who had shared a life built on a lie, unraveling it in the cold November air. Then he said something I did not expect. "I hope he is good to you." I looked at him, startled. "Michael," he clarified. "Your son." A breath caught in my throat. "He is kind," I said, "gentle." He smiled faintly. "I guess some of that came from you then." We both laughed. Tired, soft, not joyful, but not bitter either. "I do not want to be in your life if it hurts you," he said finally. "But if there is ever a place for me, just a corner of it." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. I stood and looked out at the pond, leaves scattered like ashes across the surface. "I will think about it," I said. He nodded. "That is more than I hoped for." As I turned to leave, I placed my hand on his shoulder for just a second. And that was it. The final moment, not closure but understanding. And that, I realized, was enough. Because I did not need to fix him anymore. I did not need to be fixed either. I just needed to be free. And I was. I really truly was. I always thought the word freedom sounded too grand, too lofty. Like something reserved for speeches and parades. Not something someone like me could actually experience. But when I turned the key in the front door of Michael's bookshop that morning, I finally understood what it meant. He had called me the night before, saying he had something to show me. His voice was casual, but there was a weight to it, something simmering beneath the surface. I walked in and saw him standing by the back wall, where a new wooden sign had been hung above an arched doorway. The sign read, "The next chapter." I smiled. "What is this?" He handed me a single brass key, small, simple, polished. "It is a new section I am opening. A cozy reading space, a coffee corner, community talks. I wanted it to feel like more than just a store. I wanted it to feel like belonging." I turned the key over in my hand. "And you want me to open it?" He looked at me, serious now. "I want you to have it." I stared at him. He continued, his voice soft. "You gave someone your whole life. They treated you like furniture, like background. But I see you. I do not need you to prove anything to me. You have done enough." Tears welled in my eyes. I blinked them back. "You do not have to do this," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I want to." I walked towards the door under the sign and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Inside, warm light filtered through tall windows. Shelves lined the walls, already half-stocked with classics and memoirs. A rug in the center, a worn armchair, a small table with a tea set. It felt like a room from a dream I had forgotten I had. I turned around, completely undone. "Michael, He smiled. "Consider it yours for however long you want it." I walked into the center of the room and stood still, breathing it in. The scent of new wood, paper, and possibility. That night, I sat in the flat one last time, the old notebook on my lap, the last page still blank. I wrote, "I was a woman who gave until I vanished. Then I became the woman who took it all back. Not with rage, not with fire, but with silence, with truth, and with the kind of strength they never saw coming." The next day I finalized the donation. A portion of the house sale went straight to a foundation that supports women starting over. Those dismissed, discarded, underestimated, just like I was. They called to thank me. But I did not need thanks. Because every time I stepped into that bookshop, into the next chapter, I remembered who I was now. Not Ethan's mother, not Olivia's maid. Margaret Walker. Woman, survivor, author of her own ending. I never needed permission to start again. Just a key. And now I had it in my hand. And this time it did not open someone else's door. It opened mine. Thanks for listening. Do not forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.